in afterwards. But thank you for all that were able to make it for joining during this lunch and learn. Super excited for today's session. I've known Lucy for a little while and have been following her work that she does, and it is amazing work helping people better understand what action they can take on climate in their sort of day-to-day roles. But what I might do is just hand over to you, Lucy, to explain a little bit more about the work that you do and sort of like what motivates you on a day-to-day basis. So over to you, Lucy.
Thanks so much, Alex. And hi, everyone. Thank you. Appreciate you taking the time, probably on your lunch break, to check in. So my name's Lucy. I run a program called Work for Climate. We're at workforclimate.org if you want to check us out. We are a not-for-profit. Really important for us to occupy that kind of NGO space so that we can stay grounded in our activist roots and not kind of get dragged across into like a sustainability as usual space with the work that we're doing. But basically, I used to work in brand and marketing for a long time, and probably like many of you, went through a process of realizing that we don't have much time to change the story, like the situation that we're in, and started thinking about like, how can I adapt or transition my career into something that is focused on climate solutions or solving this problem. And I was lucky enough to get hired to run or to start up Work for Climate. And what we do is we help employees inside of companies to essentially turn their job into climate jobs, but without moving into like what's the word? Like a sustainability role. Great if you're already in like a technical role, but if you're not in a role, we help those people figure out how their skill set and their experiences can be applied to shifting their company in order to accelerate climate progress. And basically, our theory of change is grounded in the fact that corporations control all of the resources on our planet, right? Governments make decisions, but corporations are the ones who have the power to mobilize money and resources rapidly. Corporations are the ones that are pumping up carbon emissions into the atmosphere. And so our theory of change is based on the fact that if we can push the brakes on the inside of corporations on how rapidly they're pumping carbon emissions into the atmosphere, then it will go some way to mitigating the worst impacts of climate. And what we do at Work for Climate is we talk to employees like yourselves, and we give people practical tools and frameworks to apply in their current roles inside of their companies and really get them organizing for change, influencing leadership, and driving policy commitments from their corporations from the inside. That's a little bit about me, Alex.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing, Lucy. And what I really like about sort of Work for Climate is this like reimagination of activism. You know, a lot of the time, activists are perceived as people kind of marching the streets and you know, training themselves to different items and buildings in the community. I'm keen to just dive a little bit deeper into your activist roots. What does climate activism in a workplace actually look like, and how does one sort of begin to embody an activist mindset in their day-to-day work?
Love that question, Alex, and also want to appreciate you because that's the work that you're doing. I see you showing up in that space a lot as well. So for me, climate activism, I'm not a traditional activist, and I am so grateful to like the true environmentalist activists, social justice activists, people who have been part of social movements for a really long time, who have been fighting for a better society on behalf of all of us for many, many years. And I am really late to the party. How I think about bringing more people into the climate movement and climate activism is that to be a climate activist, you don't have to super glue your hands to a Picasso. Yes, that is one way to capture attention and to to get things happening. And I stand in solidarity with like the brave young and old activists who are doing that important work for us. But just because you don't necessarily have the courage or the inclination to take nonviolent direct action in that way, there are ways to be an activist in the workplace. The thing for me that I keep in my mind is that the status quo is what is going to really screw us over. And so for me, being an activist in the workplace, it's about standing up to that status quo and saying, this is not good enough. We can do better. And so if you have the courage to do that in small ways at work, we can do better than this. Looking at how companies are starting to backslide on climate commitments, realize things are hard. Yeah, it's going to be really hard to achieve net zero. We've never done it before. You know, this is an energy transition that we have to go through. This is an industrial revolution that we have to go through. And it's the first time an industrial revolution has ever had a time cap on it. This is going to be hard, and we can be activists inside of our company as we see companies start to take the foot off a little bit and go, oh, this is harder than we thought it's going to be. It's going to cost us more money. To me, being an activist is looking at that and saying, no, that's not good enough. And we as a workplace of employees, we're not prepared to accept that message. And there are things that we can do as employees in order to, number one, help our company. Get behind them and go, yeah, we know it's hard. We know it's going to cost money, but here's a bunch of ways that we think we can do it. Here's a bunch of ideas. Here's a bunch of solutions that we've come up with from the ground up. And that's how I can see climate activism as being something that's accessible to a group of people who don't traditionally engage in activist kind of protests and that sort of thing.
Yeah, awesome. And I think like a lot of the people in this group are looking to better understand how they can build their skill sets to transition their careers to work more on climate. And what I love about Work for Climate is, you know, your thesis is that you can actually begin to do that already in the job that you're at. What would you say is like the foundational skill set that's like crucial for you know, a climate activist internally? And like, what are the sort of like number one strategy you would advocate for someone using to maybe begin to build like a coalition in their workplace to make that argument that you've seen from maybe past graduates of your program that have had success in implementing change in their workplace?
Such a good question. And it feels like you already feels like you know a lot of these answers, and the people on this call probably know a bunch of these answers as well. It's not rocket science. It's like simple frameworks. For me, the starting point is those two areas of like, are you already in a technical sustainability role and you have a mandate, or are you in a non-technical role and you don't have a mandate, but you have a heap of other skills that give you power inside your workplace? Like, we think about power a lot. Our theory of change is about building power on the inside of your workplace. So power is in your it's in your expertise. It's in your ability to lead. Like, are you a project manager? Are you someone who has stood up initiatives from scratch? Like, you know what that skill set is. If you're in that non-technical, like you don't work in a sustainability role, the starting point there is figure out like which archetype, if you like, are you. We have a set of archetypes that we think about when we think about change in the workplace. So you have the practitioner, which is those sustainability experts. So they're the practitioners. They're the ones with the mandate who can advocate policy change with their expertise behind them. Then you have the influencer. So people, maybe you're at a certain level in the company, or you have the ear of the CEO or the CFO, and you understand that you have the ability to influence at a high level, or you understand the power dynamics within your organization. Maybe you are the protector. So a protector is someone who creates enabling structures and creates like safety cover for other influences like inside the workplace. So you might be in a senior role and you can help create the enabling conditions for your team to be working on stuff. Or maybe you are an organizer. So that kind of doesn't really matter what role you're at, but you can be connecting people inside of your workplace to talk about stuff like what we're doing on this call today. You could describe this as organizing, like we're getting a group of people together who really care deeply about something. They want to learn about it. They want to understand where they fit into solving the problem. Like that's what organizing is. So like step one, understand where you're at, and then find one other person who you think feels similarly to you. Reach out to that person and say, hey, I've been thinking about this thing a lot. I want to be working on it. I want to be figuring out how my role can be doing more to solve this problem. Connect with them, catch up, have a coffee, start building that network, start building connections with people inside your workplace. They are in there, even though all the signals in the media are telling us right now that things are going backwards. That is not the case. Like there are people like us who are feeling it more than ever. Find each other, share how you're feeling. That is step one. And then the technical framework, stuff that companies have to do, it's not rocket science. Like we teach that in our course. We've got a really basic framework. It's all about energy and energy use. And then beyond that, it's influence. So how is your company using its energy? And how is your company using its influence?
Yeah, love that, Lucy. And I love sort of like some of the archetypes you've mapped there. And I definitely sort of just shout out like whatever sort of way for people on the call, your company is involved in mandatory climate reporting. If it is, just get involved in that. Like get part of like the sustainability committee if there's a sustainability committee. If there isn't a sustainability committee, organize the first meeting to, you know, get involved, to get ahead of mandatory climate reporting. Understand, you know, what carbon accounting tools you use, because, you know, your current workplace is probably one of the best places you can start building those skills if you want to go on and transition into doing more work in sustainability and climate. And it can think of it as almost like a training ground for scaling the amount of impact you can make in your career. I'm curious, before we open it up to questions from the audience, Lucy, to just hear, are there any particular success stories from people that have gone through your academy that you'd like to call out as you know, someone who advocated for that internal change and you know, it led to some sort of big outcomes being achieved?
I mean, there are dozens of case studies now. It's been a very successful program. We didn't start the Work for Climate Academy as like a training ground to move into sustainability or to move into climate roles, but the technical components of the knowledge are giving people so much that we do have dozens of examples of people coming in like they're in a marketing role, and then by the time they leave, they've actually set up a sustainability department in a company that didn't have one. So doing exactly what you've said, Alex. One example, front of my mind is Bernie from Who Gives a Crap, and his story is profiled on our website. He did the academy, having no sustainability background, switched Who Gives a Crap to renewable energy, did this massive solar program for them, and then ultimately became their head of sustainability. So he had a career change as well as driving impact. Another example really close to my heart is a woman called Loretto at Salesforce. She did the academy with us a couple of years ago, and is now, like, it blows my mind. If any of you are in Sydney around at Climate Week, like, Loretto is leading the AI in climate Salesforce event. Like, she stood that up last year. She got global speakers from Salesforce, from Amazon, from like a bunch of other companies, like big influencers, the people in this space who are driving change. Got them all together at this conference, is running it again this year, and has really made a name for herself, building both her technical capability and her influencing skills, and just starting to understand how you can use your individual influence, and then you can also leverage the influence of your company. So she's kind of figured out that Salesforce is this enormous machine that she can almost point at solving the problems and surfacing these conversations. So those are two really great examples that spring to mind.
Yeah, awesome. And I know, for example, Salesforce is playing a big role in helping support some of the action that happens at Climate Action Week Sydney through what Greenhouse is doing. So I have seen some of the stuff that Loretto's posted, and it's amazing to hear that, you know, she was able to directly apply those skill sets and make those transformative leaps and bounds in such a short amount of space. So that's super exciting. I might just open up to the floor to see if we've got any particular questions from around the grounds for Lucy. If anyone wants to sort of either raise their hand or come off mute, does anyone have any particular questions? Michael?
Hi, yeah, I'm just trying to figure out how to come off mute on this little device. Hey, Lucy, really great to hear your story. It's really quite inspiring, actually, and I think that advocating from the inside is it's a massive opportunity, and obviously depending on which type of organization you're in, you're going to find it easier and in some instances completely unbearable and very, very challenging. What I'm interested to know from you is, based on the insights that you've had working with folks who are kind of making grounds as internal advocates and sort of, you know, driving change, what are some of the big challenges that people are facing? You know, what I'm finding is that the range of maturity is like so significantly different. Like, you've got people who are just starting out and really trying to figure out kind of which way to go collectively, versus other sort of organizations that are very mature and that, you know, they've got their benchmarking and their reporting and they've got their ESG stuff all happening. But if you think about organizations where it's still quite foundational, where do you see some of the big challenges that, you know, internal advocates are facing in terms of kind of just getting the conversation going, changing some of those mindsets?
Good question. And yeah, to echo what you're calling out in that question, it's different from industry to industry or tier to tier. If we think about like those top tier, like your listed companies who are already in line with mandatory reporting, they know what they need to do with all that kind of thing. Like, they're going to have, if you're working inside those companies, the challenges that you're going to be facing are around speed and ambition, because those companies, there is very few companies who, regardless of their net zero targets, are actually doing anywhere near enough. So the challenges that you're going to face as an employee there are around pushing harder than sustainability as usual and raising the ambition. So it's going to take different types of kind of arguments from the inside to be able to influence that. You need to be leveraging competitor dynamics. You need to be like, if you think about Coles and Woolies, for example, and for a little while in maybe 2021, they had like a bit of a race to net zero between the two of them. So leveraging competitor dynamics when you're inside one of those listed companies is a way to overcome that just like slow pace. In like a private company or a smaller company, the things that you're going to have to do are overcoming inertia, battling the status quo. You can leverage external regulation. So the fact that mandatory reporting comes in this year for listed companies, for next year it's coming in for everyone. No one is ready for it. There's a 3-year moratorium on getting that mandatory reporting kind of up and going. That's 3 years to sort of build the muscle and do the reps, but you're going to need to be getting your companies doing that. So in smaller companies, it's getting started, it's overcoming inertia. And I think, to bring it down to an individual level, figuring out where your own risk appetite is for having conversations. Like, some people, it's going to be high and you are going to be relentless. For other people, maybe you got a really big mortgage and you got a family and you can take less less risk in the workplace. Figure out how you can build that network, embed that network of other people around you having these conversations, so that it's never going to be pointed just at you. There is power in numbers. I could talk about this all day, Michael. I hope that short answer was enough to get you started.
No, it's great. Thank you. I appreciate that. I mean, it is just kind of food for thought, just because everybody's situation is so different. And it's just trying to find the right kind of hook, to kind of get people to pay attention, right? So, obviously there's the bottom line, there's the competitive nature of it, which you've just talked about. There's things like reputation and trust and all that sort of stuff. But I think just, yeah, exactly. Like what is the kind of discussion you can have? What is the conversation you can have just to get people to sit up and pay attention? I think that's great. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Awesome. Thanks for the question, Michael. Does anyone else have any other questions, or maybe even like their own individual situation that they might want to share that they're in, that they might want to get advice on from Lucy? Henry, friend of the program.
Hello. How is everyone? I have a quick question, which I suppose I'll probably take offline with Lucy. But I think it would be beneficial for everyone else, because I joined the Law Institute of Victoria 4 months ago, and they're a huge behemoth of an organisation with a lot of long-reaching goals and aspirations for diversity in that kind of big sector. And I'm trying to figure out how to weave climate messaging into what I'm doing as a social media campaigns coordinator. And the first step is most likely going to have to be building a green team. So that's where I'm starting out. But the problem is I've got the only thing that I've got so far is a wellbeing team here. So it's more like fitting in with everyone else's systems. How do I get the green team to be as big as wellbeing, or how do I combine the two? It's sort of a very tricky kind of ecosystem to work in. And I think that's the case for quite a lot of kind of peak bodies that are non-profit, and they're kind of going for really good new initiatives, but don't know which one to start with or how to combine them. That's a very non-question for you, everyone, but it's just an interesting situation.
Love the question, Henry. Great to hear your voice. Henry, I would encourage you to tap into your activist passions and know that there are other people who feel the same way inside your organization, and probably recognize that they're in a conservative space. Like it's traditional institutions, traditionally conservative does not mean that individuals inside those organizations do not care deeply about climate. I would encourage you to start that green team and do it kind of slow burn, like find 1 or 2 other people that you can have a conversation with about climate, and maybe you bring it in via the context of legal cases. So the law is one of the strongest tactics that the climate movement has for fighting climate change. So look at live cases, look for opportunities that are happening in the ether right now. Like, where are there cases that you think you could start talking about at work? Like, where has something like the Shell case where they appealed and won, and so many people felt bad about that, like things like that. Where is the law being used one way or another, and how do you feel about that? And use that perhaps as your stepping stone into that conversation. But Henry, very keen for an offline chat. So give me a call, send me an email.
Will do. Thank you so much. That's just the beginning.
Yeah, I was just thinking that sort of like the legislation that's come out around greenwashing could be an interesting sort of conversation topic to propose hosting like a workshop on or something like that, Henry. So yeah, cool to hear you're thinking about that. Does anyone else have any other questions they may want to ask Lucy or talk about their individual sort of situation before we let her go to get back to her job? Parikshit, I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce your name. We haven't met before. Do you want to maybe share your question?
Yeah, hi. Good afternoon, Lucy. Thank you for your talk. Am I audible? Hello?
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So I'm part of the Melbourne Climate group on WhatsApp and the other groups as well. So I was just curious. At the moment, I'm looking out for work at the nexus of data and sustainability. And I have a bit of a background in mathematics, actuarial science, and global policy. So, and at the moment, I'm volunteering with Regenerative Futures think tank that works not just on sustainability, but making Melbourne more regenerative. So any suggestions, any thoughts, if you would like me to keep in mind, or anything that you would recommend, looking out for work in this space at the nexus of data.
Where my mind immediately went to is materiality. When you said the actuarial science piece, did I mishear you? Is that what you mentioned?
Yes, I have an educational background, but I've never worked in the actuarial space. I've worked in the data analytics space and possess a few years of commercial experience there.
Yeah, cool. So I think that my advice is follow your curiosity, follow your interest, keep doing what you're doing, like with Regenerative Futures, with the Melbourne Climate Network, like build your network in the movement space, and then follow your curiosity and your expertise. You mentioned like maths, analytics, data, actuarial science, like all of that to me stacks up around the topic of materiality and climate risk. And to me, that is our biggest opportunity in the next 5 years to really turn this thing around, is once people begin to wake up to material risk and economic risk from climate change. The insurability crisis that is happening in the US, in California, it's happening in Australia. What happens when banks and insurance companies will no longer insure properties or remortgage homes once they're destroyed from a flood or a fire? What happens to our economic system? So I would advise you to leverage your academic background in a way that makes sense for climate, and you will start to become like a go-to person that people want to ask you questions like, what do you think about this? What do you think about this? Because we are moving into the era of like material risk actualizing.
Interesting. Excellent. I've made a note of it. Sure. Thank you. Excellent.
Great
Thank you,
suggestion, Lucy. Well, thank you everyone for joining today's Lunch and Learn with the awesome Lucy Piper. Definitely check out Work for Climate if you're looking for strategies to engage more in that sort of climate activism in your workplace. And once again, thank you so much for joining us, Lucy. Really appreciate your time.
Pleasure. Appreciate all your time too. We landed it 1 p.m. on the dot. Alex, you're an absolute pro.
I'm getting better. Thanks
all
all for joining.
See you soon.
Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye.